the skyrocketing cost of living.
I was skipping meals because I was struggling to afford my food and my rent.
2 million Canadians had to use the food bank in 1 month alone.
No wonder crime is rocketing after 8 years of Justin Trudeau.
Canada is worse than you think. Just 2 years ago, a simple 2-bedroom apartment in Toronto cost on average 2,400 Canadian dollars. Today, that's 3,300, an average increase of 25% per year, and that's not an outlier.
I just found out my rent's gonna be increased from $2,100 a month to $2,400 a month for a 1-bedroom condo in Toronto.
In most Canadian cities, you would need to earn at least double the minimum wage to afford a 1-bedroom apartment, and you can forget about buying. In major cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the minimum income that's required to qualify for a mortgage is double or triple the median household income. This makes buying even unattainable for the top 10% of earners. There is a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, and now even an immigration crisis. This is a real change from the Canada I know and admire. What has happened?
It's time for a change in this country, my friends, a real change!
This is how living in Canada became impossible with hindsight.
Canadians from all across this great country sent a clear message tonight. It's time for a change in this country, my friends, a real change.
Justin Trudeau was first elected in 2015 with a message of positivity.
This is what positive politics can do.
He built his campaign on hope, and the media often drew comparisons with Obama in the United States.
I want to say this. Many of you have worried that Canada has lost its compassionate and constructive voice in the world. Well, we're back.
On his first day in office, he entered a Montreal metro station to take selfies with commuters. The exchange went viral. The atmosphere was exuberant. There was a feeling of hope and positivity. Trudeau had the second highest approval rating of any new prime minister in Canada's history. To understand how his approval ratings have turned around so dramatically, why Canada is in a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, and most surprisingly is now struggling with immigration, we need to go back in history. Canada is a nation of immigrants. In the mid-1800s, the population of Canada was almost entirely concentrated on the east coast, along the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes. To its west and north lay a vast and sparsely populated area that they wanted to populate. They used immigration as a tool to build their country. They attracted new people with a comprehensive marketing campaign. "Build your nest in Western Canada" was the message, calling it the New El Dorado. Boatloads of prospective migrants arrived in Canada and were vetted by migration officers. They were particularly eager to attract talented farmers. They could help Canada's westward expansion by settling uninhabited areas. They built villages and turned them into cities, attracting commerce and industry, over time strengthening Canada's grip on the West. By 1920, population centres had emerged all along Canada's southern border. They grew from 3 million inhabitants to 9 million. These immigrants were selected on merit, but also on race. Canada wanted to maintain the status of a white man's country. But after World War II, these discriminatory practices came under scrutiny. Canada started to build its modern immigration system. This was based on a points system. Prospective immigrants were scored based on their age, education, training, and language skills. The basic philosophy is that immigrants are selected based on their merit and what they can contribute to the country. This system is still in place in Canada today, making it the oldest immigration system of any country in the OECD. An early challenge was that an increasingly large percentage of newcomers were family members. In 1971, economic migrants made up 73% and family members 21%. But a decade later, this had turned around. Family members were seen as unproductive consumers of welfare benefits, and this prompted the government to make entry requirements stricter. By 1995, the percentage had dropped to 36%. Canada vested a lot of power in the federal executive branch of government, which makes it possible to respond quickly to unwanted flows of migrants. They kept identifying weak spots and making improvements, and by the early 2000s, the system was hailed around the world as one of the best. Even Donald Trump had good things to say about it.
Nations around the world, like Canada, have a merit-based immigration system.
But what was most impressive were Canada's exceptionally high levels of public acceptance. Immigration, until recently, wasn't a controversial issue. In 2018, 2/3 of Canadians believed that immigration was a good thing for their country, the highest level of any country in the OECD. But that wouldn't last.
Canadians are almost universally positively inclined towards immigration. We know that immigration is a source of strength and resilience and growth for our communities, and that's a wonderful thing we should be very, very proud of.
Public opinion on immigration has shifted dramatically during the last years, from people feeling overwhelmingly supportive to most people feeling concerned. During the first 4 years under Trudeau, the population grew at a record pace, mostly because of immigration, and it slowed during the pandemic, and that's where the problem started. Canada was facing a host of challenges. One of them was a shortage of workers. There were difficulties in all major sectors, from construction to healthcare. Companies were just unable to find the people with the right skills.
It's simple to me. Canada needs more people.
This was the new Minister of Immigration.
Canadians understand the need to continue to grow our population if we're going to meet the needs of the labour force.
Fraser, like many before him, saw immigration as a tool to fix specific issues, the worker shortage, but also demographics.
You know, immigration in Canada is not just something that we do, it's who we are. It's who we've always been.
All across the Western world, the population is aging, and that is an issue. But in Canada, it is extreme. In 1971, there were 7 people of working age for each senior. In 2012, this was down to 4. The projection is that there will only be 2 workers for every retiree by 2036. The number of Canadians that are over the age of 75 will double over the next 2 decades, while fewer people are entering the workforce.
If we don't do something to correct this demographic trend, the conversation we're going to have 10 or 15 years from now won't be about labour shortages. It's going to be about whether we have the economic capacity to continue to fund schools.
Aging. We need people to arrive with their talents, with their hopes, with their dreams, with their capacities to work hard, to build our communities, to build our future.
Public opinion was shifting. Whereas in 2022, 27% of people believed that there was too much migration to Canada, in 2023, this was up to 51%, and in 2024, to 58%.
All right, well, behind me is the Take Back Canada March against mass immigration.
In July 2024, there were protests.
There's a lot of disaffected Canadians here who feel like the government has not been listening to them.
This was an unusual sight in Canada.
And what happens to the election in 2025? Is mass immigration going to become the main issue in the election, or are politicians going to try to run away from it like they seem to be doing right now?
In 2025, there are federal elections in Canada, and Trudeau might lose his seat.
2 broccoli heads was $11.44. $11.44 at Save On Foods in Langley.
Like, we have a serious problem here in Canada. Just came to $218. How?
The government likes to publish figures that show how the economy is growing. This is technically true, but the growth is primarily fueled by a growing population. Per capita growth is down, along with individual living standards.
This apartment is 750 square feet, and I pay $4,300 a month.
People are working 3 jobs just to live in this city. It's actually crazy, and they're still struggling to pay their bills.
There is a clear mismatch between how fast Canada's population is growing and how long they need to supply housing and service infrastructures like healthcare and schools. This affects all layers of society, but this is most acutely visible in the cost of housing.
Okay, we need to talk rent increases because this is getting out of hand.
Would you pay $800 a month to share a bed with a stranger? That's what this Vancouver listing is offering.
The most vulnerable people are people with little to spare, like students. A story broke about 25 students that were living in one basement in Brampton, and it went viral. The mayor of the city responded that they've seen cases like these on a regular basis.
Like this landlord who's renting out 6 beds on the floor with dividers between them for $325 each.
The number of temporary residents, which includes temporary workers but also international students, have increased dramatically. In 2022, they numbered 1.4 million, and in 2024, this had doubled to 2.8 million. Public opinion had now turned against Canadian immigration policies, and for the first time, it had become a controversial topic. Trudeau, with elections coming up, needed to act.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is promising a massive federal program to deal with the housing crisis in Canada.
So today, we are releasing the most comprehensive and ambitious housing plan ever seen in Canada.
He put Sean Fraser, former Minister of Immigration, in charge of housing.
I know we're going to solve the housing crisis because I know what Canadians are capable of.
These decisions were vilified in a comment section on YouTube. It's crazy that people believe the guy that got us into this mess is the guy that's gonna get us out. Too little, too late. You cannot be the solution to the problem you created.
The reality is different parts of the country have seen different challenges. In addition to population growth, there have been supply chain constraints that have driven up the cost of building. We're trying to address a 30-year lack of investment in affordable housing, and we're soon going to hit a bottleneck with the productive capacity of the Canadian workforce to build the homes we need.
Fraser is in an awkward position. Perhaps letting in 9 million new Canadians before homes were built for them had a little to do with this problem. A majority of people now disagreed with immigration policies. They were angry and frustrated by the cost of living crisis, and immigrants felt that they were unfairly portrayed as the cause of the problem.
They miscalculated how much immigrants they want. They miscalculated how much housing they have, how much they could accommodate over here, and now they are blaming all it on us.
Trudeau's approval rating dropped in September 2024 to just 33%, and only 26% favored him as the Prime Minister. He had to turn this around.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. In a moment, Minister Miller will be detailing our immigration plan. Before he does, I want to say a few things. Canadians are justifiably proud of our immigration system. It has made our economy the envy of the world. It's how we've built strong, diverse communities. It's how we've demonstrated that differences can and must be a source of strength, not a source of weakness for communities and society. Today, we're announcing that we will reduce the number of immigrants we bring in over the next 3 years, which will result in a pause in the population growth over the next 2 years.
Trudeau announced that they'll change course. They'll lower the number of new arrivals to slow population growth. He admitted he was wrong.
We didn't get the balance quite right.
When he took office, there was already a 3-decade-long lack of investment in affordable housing. There were building challenges and supply chain issues, but as PM, he bears the burden of responsibility. It was his choice to allow entry to such large numbers of immigrants, growing the population and adding pressure to the housing market. The affordability of housing and the cost of living in general are very visible signs of a deteriorating living standard. In 2019, 19% of Canadians felt that Canada was extremely unequal. That is now up to 38%. To the question whether the cost of living is now worse, the number rose from 66% in 2019 to 84% in 2024. And I'm still just scratching the surface. Canada. This was a real change. I hope that you learned something.